On an oppressively hot July afternoon, the suburban bliss facade was broken in a way that would remain with the community for many years to come. At the heart of this catastrophe were the Hendersons. Thaddeus, a renowned investment banker with experience and commitment to the community and work ethic, and his 38-year-old wife Margot, a yoga instructor by day, who was well known for her lively disposition and contagious laugh. They had become mainstays in the neighborhood. Over 10 years, they appeared to have a flawless marriage, which many next-door neighbors envied. The Coopers were widowed, and Elaine lived with her 19-year-old son Liam, a sophomore in college. The Coopers' summer residence had become a familiar sight. Years ago, they moved in, and while they kept more private than most, they were usually favored by their neighbors. None could have anticipated that these common lives would come into contact in such a disastrous manner. Thaddeus was motivated by aspiration, born to parents of the working class in rural Iowa. He had fought his way up the social ladder through pure tenacity and an almost compulsive work ethic. During his early years, he became well known as a rising star at a financial institution where his associates respected his keen analytical mind. His clients valued his straightforward approach to wealth management. Margot's path to marriage was different. The daughter of a university professor and an artist, she was raised in a home that cherished originality and self-expression. She attended university to study modern dance, hoping for a career in theater, but a knee injury sustained during her final year ruined her plans. This resulted in a change to coaching yoga and wellness. They met at a charity event. Thaddeus, already prosperous but deficient in social graces, was instantly attracted to Margot's charisma and vibrancy. For Margot, Thaddeus stood for consistency and the assurance of a cozy existence that would enable her to follow her dreams without concern about money. They wed a year later during an opulent event that became the talk of their social circle. In the beginning, they had a pleasant marriage. Thaddeus's professional career proceeded to prosper, and he was pleased to be able to provide the life he felt Margot deserved. Margot threw herself into being the ideal businesswoman's spouse, throwing dinner parties and attending social gatherings vital to Thaddeus's networking. She additionally took up yoga instruction part-time at a high-end studio, discovering contentment in assisting others in achieving equilibrium and inner tranquility. However, as the years passed, cracks started to show in their meticulously crafted life. Thaddeus's work hours increased, his passion driving him to pursue larger agreements and customers. He was seldom arriving home before 10 p.m., and even when he was there in body, his thoughts were frequently elsewhere, continuously examining his phone for emails or updates on the market. Margot, getting close to her 40s, discovered herself getting restless. The yoga courses and nonprofit groups that once comprised her days now felt empty, and she started to scrutinize the decisions that had brought her to this moment, wondering if she had exchanged her fantasies for a golden cage. The inability of the couple to conceive despite years of effort brought an additional layer of stress to their partnership. Throughout the summer, the Hendersons' marriage was a well-kept front. They continued to seem like the golden couple, carrying on to thrive at work. Thaddeus, having closed a deal recently, qualified for a partnership. Margot had more students in her yoga courses, attracted to her kindness and seeming tranquility. But privately, they were practically strangers. When conversations did occur, they were perfunctory and focused on schedules and social duties. Physical closeness had become a unique instance, with every touch packed with unsaid grievances and unmet expectations. Neither Margot nor Thaddeus wanted to acknowledge, even to themselves, the extent of their drift. Maintaining the delusion of a content marriage was simpler than facing the void that had developed sporadically between them. This unnoticed gap in their relationship was going to turn into the trigger for a catastrophe that would destroy not only their existence, but the entire Riverside community. The Coopers moved into the residence next door to the Hendersons after Elaine's husband, Dr. Reginald Cooper, a reputable oncologist, passed away. Reginald, who had fought a long battle with illness, left Elaine to raise Liam by herself. A soft-spoken librarian, Elaine initially found it difficult to adapt to life in the new neighborhood. Relocating from their modest St. Paul home was essential to get away from the recollections that plagued their old house. However, the wealthy suburb seemed foreign to her. She turned to her books for comfort and aimed to create a garden that quickly became the neighborhood's envy. Liam Cooper was a lanky, withdrawn adolescent, more comfortable with computers than people. Shifting to a different institution was challenging, and he frequently found himself the target of bullies who made fun of his used clothing and reserved manner. It was during this period when Thaddeus Henderson showed Liam the ropes, providing him with a lawn mowing job and completing odd tasks around the community. Over the ensuing years, Liam developed from a shy teenager into a charming young man. His innate intellect found an outlet in his study of computer science at the university. Despite his increasing confidence, Liam remained concerned about his mother's seclusion and isolation, making a point of returning home most weekends, even if his friends were organizing get-togethers or road trips. It was during one of these weekend visits in early June that Liam saw Margot Henderson in a fresh light. Elaine consistently showed gratitude for the generosity of the Hendersons, especially Margot's attempts to incorporate her into community events. She frequently mentioned Margot's unknowingly nuanced generosity, nodding at the simmering feelings beneath her son's kind exterior. This spark between Liam Cooper and Margot Henderson was intense and unexpected. It occurred on a warm night in early June during one of the Hendersons' renowned summer cookouts. Thaddeus, as usual, held court near the grill, entertaining his co-workers with stories of his most recent financial triumph. Margot, feeling alone among the crowd, had retired to the comparatively peaceful pool house to get more ice. Liam, reluctantly hauled by his mother to the gathering, sought safety from the noise and socializing. Unaware that it was occupied, he entered the pool house and found Margot fumbling with a big ice bag. Their gazes locked, and in that moment, something changed. When their hands grazed the ice, they stood frozen for a moment. Margot, usually articulate, started to stutter, and this brief encounter set the tone for what was to follow. Over the next few weeks, Liam and Margot found themselves creating justifications to be in each other's company. It began innocently, with Margot asking Liam for assistance with her laptop, and Liam offering help in her garden. Each exchange was filled with a subtext of attraction that neither could ignore. Their first kiss happened about a month after the cookout. Liam had been assisting Margot in preparing for one of her outdoor yoga sessions. As they completed the task, an unexpected summer storm appeared. They sprinted beneath a nearby gazebo, gasping in shock as the rain fell around them. Margot, glancing at Liam, experienced a wave of yearning she hadn't felt in years. Before she had a chance to reconsider, she leaned in and kissed him. Their relationship swiftly became intense, motivated by a mix of youthful enthusiasm and a desperate need to feel alive again. They met in isolated areas of the town, in the back section of the nearby theater, and in the hidden corners of the public library. Perilously, they also met within the Henderson residence whenever Thaddeus was away. Each encounter left them yearning for more, distracted by the heat of their affair. Margot felt refreshed, relearning aspects of herself that had been dormant. Liam, captivated by Margot's tale and the forbidden nature of their union, felt alive in a way he hadn't before. However, as summer progressed, the pressure of keeping their secret became apparent. Close calls started happening more often. A neighbor nearly spotted them, and Elaine gave Margot a skewed look when her name was mentioned excessively in conversation. Guilt began to burden both of them. Liam battled the awareness that he was deceiving Thaddeus, a man who had been kind to him. Margot found herself lying increasingly more to her husband, another fissure in the foundation of her marriage. Despite the hazards and the shame, they couldn't stop their affair, caught in a whirlwind of ardor and blind yearning that led to the catastrophic events looming on July 15th. The morning was hot and muggy, with thick air signaling an impending storm. It was Monday, and Riverside roused to life as its citizens got ready for another week of work and schedules. For Thaddeus Henderson, the day started as any other. He got up early, dressed in one of his flawlessly fitted suits, and headed to the office before Margot had even roused from her slumber. She woke up later, her thoughts already buzzing with plans for the day. The previous evening, Thaddeus had told her that he would be staying late to work on a vital client dinner that would cement their relationship. For Margot, this represented an opportunity. She texted Liam, her pulse pounding as she proposed that he come over later that day. Liam, who had been agonizing over the affair for days, saw the message as a chance to put everything to rest. He answered with a straightforward, "All right," deciding to end it before circumstances deteriorated further. Both of them had a slow day. Margot followed through on her regular morning yoga class, but an anxious tension replaced the usual serenity. Her pupils couldn't help but notice the change. Meanwhile, Liam, at his summer job, found it difficult to concentrate on the code. Lines on his screen, his thoughts continually wandering to Margot. At 2 p.m., Liam proceeded next door, slyly peering around to make sure none of the surrounding residents were observing. Margot swiftly ushered him in, her face flushed with a mix of apprehension and thrill. Liam was the one who shattered the silence, beginning to say they should talk, but Margot, misinterpreting his motivation and motivated by a desperate need to feel wanted, cut him off with an intense kiss. Despite his reservations, Liam responded, his determination waning in the face of Margot's fervor. What transpired next was a haze of abandoned clothing and tangled limbs. They arrived at the master bedroom, their determination to put an end to the relationship temporarily forgotten as they became engrossed in each other. Meanwhile, across town, Thaddeus scowled as he sat in his office, the numbers on his computer screen for the client presentation not adding up. Frustrated, he snapped, deciding to return home, gather his thoughts, and then come back to the office to complete the presentation before the client dinner at 8 p.m. He saw Liam's beat-up Honda pull into the driveway a short distance down the road, but considered it probable that he was helping Elaine. Thaddeus unlocked the front door, the house silent. Uncommon for Margot, a half-empty wine glass rested on the coffee table. He heard a muffled sound from upstairs and, scowling, ascended the staircase. The sound got louder as he reached the master bedroom. He opened the door to find a scene that would be burned into his memories forever. His wife, the long-term love of his life, and Liam Cooper on their bed. In a fury and anguish, he rushed forward, his hands clenched into fists. Pulling Liam away from the bed, Margot cried out, rushing to cover herself and keep the two men apart. Thaddeus's first punch struck Liam hard in the jaw, causing the younger man to stagger backward. Fueled by adrenaline and fear, Liam retaliated. The two men struggled, striking the dresser and sending framed pictures and mementos scattering across the floor. In the confusion, nobody noticed the thick crystal book spine that had toppled from the top of the dresser until Thaddeus, blinded by wrath, seized it and struck Liam's head with a terrible thump. The sound echoed in the sudden silence that followed. Liam collapsed, blood quickly accumulating around his head. Margot stood still, her scream penetrating as the horror of what had happened struck them all. As tempest clouds began to build outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Everyone's lives were altered irreversibly. The idyllic riverside facade was broken, and nothing would ever be the same. Police sirens' piercing wails broke the customary tranquility of the community. Neighbors looked out from behind curtains, curiosity mingling with trepidation, as police cars and an ambulance screeched to a stop in front of the Henderson home. The initial officers arrived on the scene to find a terrifying scene that would follow them for years. Inside, they discovered a shell-shocked Thaddeus Henderson, his hands blood-stained and seated on the edge of the bed. Margot, scarcely dressed and giddy, stood beside him. The room had all the telltale signs of a violent struggle: tipped-over furniture, shattered glass, and bloodstains on the hardwood floor. Detective Ava Rossi, a seasoned member of the police force, took over the scene for the homicide unit. Getting medical attention for Liam Cooper was her top priority, as paramedics labored frantically to stabilize him. Rossi began the careful task of piecing together the sequence of events that had led to this tragedy. Thaddeus, still in shock, was placed under arrest without resistance. Margot was questioned, the broken pieces of their tales and emotions depicting a lengthy, smoldering discord in the marriage that had erupted into violence. When word got out, neighbors gathered at the police perimeter. Elaine Cooper fell in sorrow upon learning about her son's condition. She was promptly carried off to the hospital, where Liam was struggling to survive in the intensive care unit. The investigation moved swiftly. Forensics teams searched the Henderson residence, gathering evidence and taking pictures of the crystal book spine, now a possible murder weapon. Neighbors' comments from interviews provided background on the connections between the Coopers and the Hendersons. One neighbor remembered catching elevated voices from the Henderson residence earlier in the afternoon, but had written it off as a TV or loud music. Another mentioned seeing Liam walking into the Henderson residence at approximately 2 p.m., considering it strange given Thaddeus's usual work schedule. As darkness fell and the gravity of the situation became apparent, Liam Cooper was declared dead at 9 p.m. He never regained consciousness. The assault charge against Thaddeus Henderson was promoted to second-degree homicide. In the ensuing days, details about Margot's guilt surfaced. Under close observation, she acknowledged the relationship with Liam, stating the circumstances that led to the fatal afternoon. Advised by his hurriedly hired lawyer, Thaddeus remained silent. His co-workers at the financial institution painted a picture of a man under extreme strain, overextended in his pursuit of a partnership. None doubted the extent of his marriage issues or the potential for violence. Detective Rossi understood that there wouldn't be any clear antagonists in this tale, only victims or heroes. Each had their mysteries and lies that had surfaced in the most destructive way imaginable. The plot twist that arrived next would shock everyone, including the Hendersons. Henderson's trial got off to a sharp start on an autumn morning following the incidents that rocked Riverside. The county courthouse, a majestic structure of white columns and crimson brick, was surrounded by inquisitive reporters and observers. The conflict was evident when the judge convened the court. Prosecutor Veronica Talbot, renowned for her perceptiveness and sharp tongue, presented the state's argument. She painted a striking depiction of Henderson as a person overwhelmed by fury and envy, who had killed a young man in the prime of his life. Talbot's opening remarks were calculating but powerful, her gaze sweeping around the jury as she pledged to demonstrate Henderson's culpability beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense attorney responded with a story of his own, portraying Thaddeus as a committed spouse and a rock of the neighborhood pushed over the edge by a devastating betrayal. Sterling implied that the death was a tragic mishap, brought about by a conflict that had become uncontrollable. As the trial went on, a lineup of witnesses, including forensic specialists, testified regarding blood spatter patterns and the amount of force needed to induce Liam's fatal injuries. Neighbors described the day's events and the character of both Liam and Thaddeus. Margot Henderson's testimony enthralled the court for more than 2 agonizing days. She exposed the falling apart of her marriage and the development of her connection with Liam. Her voice wavered as she spoke of the moment and terror of witnessing the conflict develop. Under cross-examination, Sterling attempted to portray Margot as a disloyal spouse whose actions had driven her husband into a temporary state of insanity. Margot remained steadfast, taking her share of the blame for the catastrophe. Elaine Cooper gave a succinct but strong testimony, overcome with anguish. She spoke of her son's generosity and aspirations for the future, everything shattered in a single act of violence. Her silent dignity and the unspeakable loss affected many in the courtroom to tears. As the trial drew to a close, all eyes were on Thaddeus Henderson. Against his attorney's advice, he decided to testify. His evidence served as a study in contrasts, seeming regretful at times and sprinkling angry flashes in between. He mentioned the strain he had experienced at work, the increasing separation in his marriage, and the horror of learning about his wife's infidelity. He asserted that he had never meant to inflict such severe damage and had just become unhinged. Professional witnesses, including psychologists, were called to provide insight into the unfortunate occurrences. Dr. Cho indicated that Thaddeus's actions could be viewed from the perspective of what psychologists refer to as intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by violent, aggressive episodes out of proportion to the circumstances. She indicated that Thaddeus's high-stress work, unspoken discontent in the marriage, and the surprise of his wife's infidelity contributed to his violent outburst. Under cross-examination, Dr. Cho acknowledged that although these factors might clarify Thaddeus's actions, they did not justify them. She emphasized that many people confront similar stressors without turning to violence. The defense called an expert in family and marriage therapy to testify regarding the effects of infidelity on the mind. Fredman explained the intense feeling of betrayal and identity loss that someone could feel upon learning of a spouse's affair, comparing it to a psychological injury capable of evoking strong emotions. The psychological evaluations presented during the trial depicted a sophisticated view of human motivation and behavior, emphasizing how individual background, social norms, and current situations can clash to create a tragic perfect storm. Following 7 grueling weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal disputes, Thaddeus Henderson's fate rested in the hands of the jury. Judge Blackwell referred the men and women to plan their verdict. After a brief deliberation, Judge Blackwell announced the sentence, citing the brutal nature of the crime balanced against Thaddeus's lack of prior criminal history and the particular circumstances. She condemned him to 25 years in state penitentiary, with the possibility for parole after 15 years. Handcuffed and taken away, the weight of the tragic events appeared to fall on Thaddeus. There were no victors in this courtroom, only lives radically changed by a flash of ardor and a brief moment of violence. Outside, reactions were inconsistent. Some believed justice had been done, while others thought the sentencing was either too severe or too forgiving. Everyone agreed that the events in Riverside would leave a lasting impression on the neighborhood for many years to come.